All right, hey everyone. I'm Greg Kim. I'm a first-year MBA, and I'm the eSports lead for the conference this year. Thank you guys for all swinging by. It's been a really fun morning seeing the pros take on a bunch of conference attendees. I know I got my butt kicked once or twice on stage. But anyway, we're really excited for this whole day on Smash, and in a second I'm going to turn it over to Daniel, but I just wanted to let you guys know, after this speech, we're going to have a 1v1 showcase where all our pros in attendance are going to run a little mini tournament, and then later in the afternoon we're going to do a 2v2 Pro-Am tournament where conference attendees can sign up and maybe play with one of the pros in a single elimination tournament. But before that, happy to introduce Daniel Lee of Cloud9, known as Tafo in the community. Daniel's going to talk a bit about the actual analytics that goes into Smash Melee play and what it takes to coach players and help them improve their game. So with that, Daniel, come on up.
Hey everybody. So thank you for the introduction. I actually never thought that I was going to be here. I'm a huge sports fan. My original favorite team was the Seattle Supersonics, who no longer exist. I see some Seattle fans over there. So I love sports since the mid-90s when Sean Kemp and Gary Payton were doing alley-oop dunks. They had a barrage of three-point shooters before Daryl Morey made that extra popular. But I'm also a gamer, so I'm really happy to be here. I never thought I'd see the day that I'd be at the Sloan Conference. My brother is more the sports guy in our family. He was a basketball player, I was a video game player, so it's nice to see all the world Smash. So for this talk, I just want to talk about where analytics is headed for Super Smash Bros. And there's going to be a little bit of confusion because there are multiple versions of Super Smash Bros. Being played in tournament. So what you guys see on the side is Smash 4, which is for the Wii U. The game that I primarily focus on is an older version of the game called Super Smash Bros. Mele, which is for the Nintendo GameCube. So I want to just highlight where we were before in our 15-year history as an esport, where we currently are, and where we're heading towards the future in terms of data and analytics. So a little bit about myself. For my day job, I don't do this 24/7. I actually work at NASA JPL. And if you guys don't know what that is, watch The Martian. It's literally a walking billboard for JPL. For this picture here, I'm standing in front of a deep space network antenna. So basically, any satellite that extends beyond Mars feeds through the deep space network antennas. And as far as esports goes, I started as a top player for the game Mele, and at my peak, I was ranked number 61 in the world for the global annual rankings. And from there, I noticed that we had a deep void in terms of content production. So when it's NBA Finals, you guys hear about LeBron James, you hear about Steph Curry, you hear about 73-9, you hear about how the Warriors blew it. Unfortunately, 3 to 4 years ago, we really didn't have anyone really writing or sharing these stories to the outer world of people who weren't really familiar with Smash. And as a result, unless you were really deeply connected with the community, you really didn't know about these players that you see on the left and right. This led me to opportunities to write content for ESPN, Red Bull, and Yahoo. I primarily focus on Yahoo now, and I do analytical articles, so some people jokingly call me the Zach Lowe of Super Smash Bros. Other times I write about narratives or pop stories, so sometimes I'm like the Bill Simmons. And currently I'm also a coach for Cloud9, so I coach one of the top 3 players in the world currently. His name is Mango. And so some interesting facts about our game in particular and why there's so much history and depth is that the Mele was released in 2001. And if you guys know about esports culture, it's very rare for a game to survive 15 years, and let alone 2 sequels. And we're a pretty resilient community, and we had over 200,000 viewers at EVO 2016 watching on Twitch, which is amazing. And EVO 2016 actually had over 2,300 people in the open bracket. And to give you guys a little bit of context, we started in 2001, and up until 2013, our largest tournament for singles was 350 people. And then we just doubled and tripled every year since. Although we're kind of flatlining now, it's kind of amazing that in the first 10 years, our largest tournament was about 350 people, and in the most recent years, we hit 2,372. So it really just shows the growth of the industry and also the growth of the game. Also, you guys see flat screen monitors here, but if you ever see those big, heavy CRT monitors, then you know that Mele is being played. So you can see those big, heavy TVs that you guys have probably thrown out for flatter LCD monitors. The reason why we use this is because the GameCube uses an older type of video signal. So if you use an LCD monitor, it introduces lag to the game, which many pros will complain about. And because of how sensitive the game is, every little frame matters, and if there's delay, then their feel of the game is off. So it's like trying to catch, I guess the best example I could give is like, let's say instead of you have like a light tennis racket, it's like your tennis racket's like 50 pounds, and you're trying to lug it, and it's very unresponsive. So let me talk about the rules of the game if you guys aren't really familiar with it. So Super Smash Bros. Is a Nintendo game. It's a fighting game, but it follows non-traditional rules. So when you look at fighting games, you typically have a life bar, and you deplete the life bar. So if you hit your opponent in Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter, the goal of the game is to deplete your opponent's life bar so they have nothing left. And if you can deplete their life bar before they deplete yours, then you win the game. In Smash, we have stocks in the form of the Mario heads that you see here, which represent lives. And we have percentage represents damage. So it's a little bit not intuitive. So what I mean is that when you have more percentage, the same attacks will knock you further and further away. And the goal of the game is like sumo wrestling, where you're trying to get your opponent off the stage and make sure that they cannot come back. And if they're not able to come back onto the stage, they lose a life, and they come back on one of these platforms. And the process repeats until a person runs out of lives. So how does analytics play a role here? I know that might be a little bit much for people who aren't familiar with Smash. I like to say that the Smash community with data is very similar to the movie Moneyball, where it's a pretty uphill battle in trying to convince people that there's analytics in the game and that they could be used to make better decisions. So in Moneyball, you have the data-driven guys who are trying to push the old guard of baseball scouting, where baseball, they kind of use their eyes and they say, this guy's a 5-point player, this guy runs really well, but it's not really based on data, it's purely subjective, it's based on the eye test. So one of the unique, unfortunate things about Mele and Smash in general is that we weren't really designed with esports in mind. So what that means is that unlike League of Legends or Dota or Counter-Strike, those games in particular will provide an API of game data for you so that after the game you can identify and study the players, the statistics with them. Maybe you look at a heat map of where they go on the map. Unfortunately, that's not the case for Smash. Where we were before is that we were very subjective, so we'd watch a tournament, we'd see a top player and just assume this particular character that he's playing just based on like a couple of results is the best character in the game. And it just really doesn't make any sense on how we got to the conclusions we did. One of the big things I was really interested in as I got more into writing about Smash and getting into analytics was how do these two variables come to play when you factor in winning. So there's two things that you can select before the game starts. So first of all, there's stages or maps, and these have very unique properties to them. So here, Mele plays on these 6 particular stages, and if you look at the layout of them, they're very different. Some of them have platforms, some of them are a flat stage, some of them are really large, some of them are really small. So I guess the analogy I can give is for baseball, you have different stadiums where you can hit a home run in terms of length, and you have the wind factor. So if you're in Colorado, you're more likely to hit home runs than another stadium, and there's different advantages to different stages. Or if you look at tennis, you have like clay, you have different types of courts where they cater to the strengths of different players. And also there's characters, and characters, as much as developers want to say that they're fair and balanced, there's tiers in the game, there's matchups that play very much like rock, paper, scissors, where one character could do really well against one character and do really awful against another. And so these two, intuitively, we can feel are very important in deciding like if you're gonna win or not. So here's another example to show the relative size of the stage. This will tell you the width and the height relative to one another, and you can see that they have different lengths, different widths, and it's really important because I mentioned how you kill each other is to knock each other out really far away, and characters that can have vertical kill moves, meaning that they send their opponent up, if they're on a higher stage or a stage with a larger vertical kill zone, then they're not going to get those kills. And if an opponent has a really good horizontal kill move, but they find that there's an extra distance towards trying to kill them, then they're not as good on that stage. So one thing that particularly got highlighted for me was back in 2014, I was at a tournament called MLG Anaheim. And I coach this guy on the top left. His name is Mango, and he plays a character named Fox. And one of the big things that people were telling me was that they should pick this stage called Fountain of Dreams, which is the background, because Mango is awful on the stage. It's not good for Fox. But the one thing that was really interesting, despite everybody telling me the same exact narrative and story to characters and stages, was that Mango kept winning on the stage. So every time his opponent would pick this stage, Mango would win. So it kind of like put this reality to me. It's like people are telling me these things of like, okay, this character is good on this stage, but what I'm seeing in the results is very different. And he later won the tournament, but lo and behold, everybody picked this stage against him, and they kept losing. So that really brought a lot of attention to my eye. No one else really noticed it. And so what I did was I did old-fashioned data collecting. So I went on YouTube, I went on Challenge, which is an online bracketing software which most players use, and I tracked every tournament set that Mango played, or the top 6 players of Mele played against each other. I logged stages, I logged characters, stock difference, and who won on an Excel sheet. So I didn't even have this website. I just meticulously went through YouTube, and I went through it. It took me hundreds of hours to do. And eventually, out of this data, I looked at 2 players in particular, so Mango on the left and Mutaking on the right. And so what people were telling me was that Marth, this character that Mutaking plays, should be really strong against Mango. But when I looked at the data for a 2-year sample set, Mango was actually winning on that stage at an 80% win rate. And in contrast, there's another stage that Mango theoretically should be winning on, and he was only performing at a 17% win rate. So those were 2 really big examples that contradicted what everybody else was thinking. And then I'll go into more details why. So when we look at this stage, I asked people more specifically after looking at this data before revealing the results, why should Mutaking win on this stage? Why is this character so good? And this is what people told me. It's a little bit more in depth, so just kind of follow along. Marth can cover a lot of the stage. So in the game, in a fighting game, if you have a long sword and a small stage, most likely you can probably hit your opponent very easily. So for the fact that Marth has that large wielding sword, we thought that's really good. For Fox, he needs to use the vertical height to get the kill, and Fountain of Dreams is a really large stage, so a lot of the kill power that Fox has to kill his opponent have been weakened, in particular for that stage. In addition, the platforms move different heights, and so we thought, hey, like that creates a lot of errors and issues for Fox, who needs to be really precise, and if they make a mistake, then they'll get hit. And because the stage is so small, Fox has nowhere to run. But what I later realized was, what did we not consider? So this is a long-held stance that people have held for nearly a decade. What we later found out by looking at more data, and I actually hand-looked through the entire set over and over again, is that I realized a couple of other factors. And I realized that, hey, once Marth gets a hit on his opponent, in video games and fighting games, you do combos. So once you get one hit, you do like a string of hits. And for Marth, he can do a lot of damage to Fox, but what I found was that for Marth, he actually doesn't do combos very well on the stage. And there's a box of data here where on average, Mutaking was only doing like 1 to 2 hits per combo, whereas if he played on another stage, he'd be doing like 80 damage and nailing 8 to 10 hits together. And we found out that the platforms, although they can create mistakes, that Mango's actually not prone to making those mistakes, so that's a non-issue. And we also found out that Fox's recovery, or Fox's ability to get back on the stage, is really good. So when everything was said and done, I actually released the article, and it actually blew people's minds that we were actually very wrong about what we thought about stages. So what this really brought was a different mode of thinking. We should consider character and stages, but because Smash is not very optimized and people are still learning new techniques in the game, we should also consider the evolving metagame and understand what variables matter and what variables don't matter. We learned that over time, people make less technical and mechanical errors, so if that becomes a factor early on when the game comes out, it's less of a factor going up ahead. And people discover new techniques, and furthermore, also there's individual player preferences. So we can say that certain characters do well on certain stages, but we also have to consider certain play styles. So in the world of Mele, there's 2 top Foxes called Armada and Leffen, and they're very campy, meaning that they like to run around and let their opponent chase them. So you do not want to take them to a large stage, but you want to take them to a smaller stage. But Mango, he likes to be in your face with the same character, so you want to pay a larger stage where you can run away from him. So you have to also consider play style. So it turns out this is very important. One of the big factors we had was that the 17% win rate on Pokemon Stadium and the 80% win rate on Fountain of Dreams, which is a difference of 63%. And if we did not give this data, then Mango would keep going Pokemon Stadium and not go to Fountain of Dreams. So where we are with this tabulated data, I like to call it the more box score data. It's like the data that you can just collect by looking at brackets. Very fortunately, we use SmashGG, which is a uniform website with an API, and I can call their API to get brackets of data in a single click, which I'm able to do. And we also look at YouTube and other brackets to aggregate data together into a database. So currently, the TAFAstats database has about 700 tournaments, 17,000 players, and over 85,000 sets in the database, and I leave it fairly open for people to look at on the website. They can look at different players to see how they do on different stages against each other. So hopefully, at this current point in time, we can use that box score data to help make better decisions on stages. And it sounds really silly because in League of Legends, you have characters, you have pick bands, and they're so regimented and so streamlined. They study that because it's really important. In Smash, we're not quite at that level yet. So what does the future hold for data? And this is where I'm most excited for the direction of Smash Analytics. So on one hand, we have player coaches that are becoming much more prevalent for the top players, and they primarily focus on mentality and mindset. So Team Liquid was the very first team that hired a coach in Crunch to help Hungrybox at events, and I became the second coach for Cloud9 to coach Mango to help his mentality and also his gameplay. We talked about out-of-game data, so just the win-losses, the characters, and the stages you pick, but we're also heading towards in-game data, and this is where I'm really excited. So in sports, we have sports UV cameras for basketball, those cameras that detect motion for basketball courts. I believe Daryl Morey and a bunch of NBA teams use it. We actually have something called PhysiStats coming out, and basically what they did here was they hacked the core gameplay of Mele so they could data dump frame by frame the positioning and the game state at every possible moment. And I'm really excited to see what we can do with that data. So this person just, lo and behold, took a memory card, hacked it, added an Ethernet port to it, and so you can connect the data directly to a computer and aggregate it in a form of JSON files. And so here, we can look at heat map profiles, and we could look at a lot more things in movement in basketball, thankfully to these cameras. In Smash, we're going to get more in-game data. So for example, we can now detect things like actions per minute. How fast are these players pushing buttons every minute? And in StarCraft, to give context, people use 300 to 400 actions per minute. But we found with a trial test of this that some of the fastest Smash players were at an APM of 350 actions per minute. We can look at things like what's their average combo length? What's the percentage of time that they knock their opponent off stage? We can look at in sumo wrestling, you want to stay towards the center, and that's really advantageous. You don't want to be on the corner, and we can actually have that data. What percentage of the time is player A closer to the center of the stage than their opponent? Is it 50%, 55%? How many times are they rolling? How many times are they spot dodging? This is all data we can collect now, and I'm really excited to see what we can do with this up ahead. Of course, this is just data, but hopefully we come to a point where we can translate this into something really useful for the players. This is an example of heat map data that we can do. So we take that position data and we just map it according to time, and we can see where they like to go. I believe for Hungrybox, one of the interesting things was he loves to be on the upper right platform. So maybe when we realize that an opponent's really scared or they want to reset the positioning, they like to go at a certain spot, and we can give our players scouting reports and say, this player likes to go in this spot, this player likes to roll towards the center, and we can identify movement trends. And so overall, I really just hope that in the combination of all the data we collect and the coaches and resources that we can continue to advance Smash metrics. What I'm currently working on is the in-game data stuff. We're actually doing a second trial test at a tournament that's happening right now where we're collecting data on the top 10 world's best players, and hopefully we can get some meaningful interaction out of that so that one day we can take this data, and for example, for me as a coach for Cloud9, I can say to Mango, hey, you got to work on your combo game. Your combo game's not as strong as Armada or Leffins. Or I can say, well, you love staying at the edge too much. You like being too greedy. We got to work on this. And so that's where we're heading towards in the future for Smash Analytics. That's pretty much it for the summary of it. I'm totally open to Q&A right now.
What's been the reason for Mele being like continuously popular among like esports people with all these sequels coming out?
That's a good question. So the question is, despite the fact that we've had these sequels come out, why is Mele still popular? I just think it's a really good game. Don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of Smash 4. I was playing it earlier today. But I think to sum it up, there are many fluky factors that actually led to it. We had a documentary that came out that really brought a revival to the game. We won the donation drive at EVO 2013, which brought in a lot of players. But mechanically, it's a really fun, rewarding game. And there was no outside force that really shut us down from playing, whereas you have Brood War, or let's say Street Fighter 4, where the developers are actively pushing Street Fighter 5. They're not going to be playing Street Fighter 4 because it's like, do I be a poor Street Fighter 4 player with no prize pots, or do I go to Street Fighter 5 where there's this $250,000 prize pot, and that lady over there running E-League, where there's, I believe, a $600K prize pot for that game. So we just overall have incentive to still play. So it's an interesting relationship without getting into too much detail. Like when you look at Nintendo and you look at competitive Smash, we're actually peanuts to what their marketing campaign wants. We're a very niche audience, and although Smash sells well, we're just a small percentage of Nintendo's portfolio. So they bring representatives to events, but like they're not like actively putting a big budget towards promoting Smash. To be honest, I probably think that they promote Splatoon more.
The in-game data you showed, was that from the Fizzy card that you were talking about, or is that from the Smash API?
So the Smash API, just to clarify, is for bracketing data. So we use that for brackets. The Fizzy memory card is what gets us the in-game data. So the question is like, how do I feel as a coach as opposed to a player? The big thing for me is I have to manage his mental state a lot. So I have to be very observant to see, is he playing on tilt? Is there something uncomfortable with him? So a lot of the aspects of preparing him and creating a proper environment where he's healthy and has a good mindset has been a lot more apparent to me. So I've been reading a lot of books. Inner Game of Tennis has been thrown around. But I'm really big on mindset because I really do believe that the top players, at least in Mele, they know the options, they know what their opponents are capable of doing, but it's whether or not they're in the right mindset. And you can see, for example, Mewtwo King, he will beat himself up if something doesn't go right. And I feel like that's a big reason why there are players that do succeed and players that don't. It's all mentality. So the question is, where do I judge player playstyle and what we should be recommending them for data? Ultimately, this comes down to a player's willingness to look at the data, because when you look at sports, if they're very stubbornly adverse to looking at data-driven decision-making, then you really can't do much in terms of saying, like, you can have as many facts as you want, but if they're not buying in, then I frankly can't do much. With Mango, he's a very feel-based player. He likes to go on gut and intuition, so I kind of have to phrase things in a certain way. So let's say we found out, lo and behold, his neutral game was really awful for whatever reason. Let's say he won 40% of the interactions. Then I would look at film and I'd ask him questions like, so like, what do you think about this situation? So I don't really present it as like the data aspect, but I just kind of ask him like thought-provoking questions that are based on what I've observed. It's a mix of both, because if I notice a really big hole in Mango's gameplay, then I see if it's just a one-time thing or if it's a trend, and then I'll ask him questions about it. But the big thing is, like, when I look at Hungrybox and Armada, they're like two of Mango's biggest competitors, and they're adding new things to their game, which Mango may not be aware of, and he's not watching data. And so I might just be telling Mango when he plays Armada next time, it's like, hey, he's doing these two moves more often, or Hungrybox is stalling a bit more here. And I might tell him like one little fact, but if I tell him too many things, the issue that comes up is he'll start thinking too much, and rather than being in a comfortable flow, he's just thinking like, what if he does this, what if he does that, and he's not playing his game. So the question is it optimal for there to be one coach per player, or are the resources good enough that you can have one coach coach multiple players? I don't think we're at that level where coaching is so sophisticated that you need to dedicate one coach to one player. I believe one coach can easily handle 5 to 10 players. But at an event, it depends, because little joke is that Mango likes to party, so one of the big things that I have to manage is making sure he doesn't drink too much the night before a tournament. So I have to be with him physically at night to say, that's your limit, you gotta go to bed. Yeah, so I wear many hats for Mango, so I don't know how much maintenance you need as a player. If you can take care of yourself and you frankly don't need a babysitter at night, then like a coach can take care of multiple players. Yeah.
Do you find other coaches are analytic-based like you, or they're more like field-based coaches like an old school baseball coach?
So me and Crunch, the other active coach, we're pretty good friends. We talk a lot. I mean, his big thing is that he'll do very similar things. He'll go over very specific things that he's scouted out. But his thing is like, a happy Hungrybox never loses. So he's just trying to keep Hungrybox in a good mental state. And that's what we've noticed with most of the players.
How do you feel the state of Smash analytics as opposed to Counter-Strike, League of Legends, Dota, Overwatch, etc.?
So the question is like the comparison of Smash analytics to other more popular esports like League or Counter-Strike. The issue that we came up with is, as I mentioned earlier, we didn't have a public-facing API for this data where an analyst can go to .dota or whatever aggregate database site, and they have I guess the best thing I can say, the best example or analogy I can give is like in a marathon race, they're at mile 19 and we're at like just starting off with like broken shoes and like we're out of fitness, like, and we're like struggling, but we're getting somewhere. Any other questions? All right.
When you're gathering the data, do you take into account like how different characters within the game have different powers, like their strength is stronger, or do you take that into account?
Okay, so the question is, do we take like character into account? So currently with the Fizzy stats and in-game data, I believe after this weekend, we're gonna have a sample size of about 70 matches, which is clearly, when you have 26 characters, it's not gonna be conclusive enough because there's confounding factors like stage and character. But at least this is a starting point for us to capture metrics, because the big thing is like we don't know, we're in a whole new field and territory here, so we have to define like what metrics we're looking for. And we're only gonna get better over time. The best analogy I can give for that is with basketball, you have field goal percentage back in the day, right? But if you're a three-point shooter, your percentage is gonna be a lot lower, but is that a bad thing? And so now we have effective field goal percentage. So over time, we're gonna evolve the data. Anyway, that looks like all the questions. Thank you very much for tuning in.